That reminds me, once I had a travel agent who had submitted a request for American Airlines Advantage card, and for some reason he typed up Father Gregory Boyle, just like that. And American Airlines didn't know how to fit it in, so I got the card back, Fat Gregory Boyle. And every time I'd show it at the counter, it was a great exercise in humility. Anyway, I'm an expert on nothing, but for 30 years I've worked with gang members, so apparently Jeff thought that made me eminently suited to address you this evening. I apologize, some of you may have heard me before, and that happens. YouTube is the bane of my existence, but because things appear and people hear you, and no matter where you go. I was invited to speak at a foster grandparent gathering in Southern California, a huge gathering, and it was the second summer in a row. I'd spoken the summer before, and so they invited me back, and afterwards this grandmother came to me, and I think she liked the talk. She had big tears in her eyes, and she grabbed both my hands, and she said, "I heard you last year. It never gets better." So kind of hoping she misspoke there, but anyway, I'm a really kind of high aerial view. I don't really have, I never had a business plan, which made me the bane of my board's existence, but there's a kind of a vision that brings us to this place and these days. It's a vision in the end of wanting the world to look differently than it currently looks. The prophet Habakkuk writes, "The vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it." But my sense of this crowd already is that you don't want to wait con los brazos cruzados, tapping your feet, staring at your watches. You want to make something happen. That's sort of the idea. But I can only speak in the most aerial view, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think the whole hope of our efforts really in the end is to create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. Folks will say no justice, no peace, but the truth is no kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace, no matter how singularly focused you may well be on those worthy goals. So in the end, the highest view, it seems to me, is that we all want to kind of create a community of kinship and imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And to that end, you want to figure out, how do you dismantle the barriers that exclude, and how do you find your way in that spirit of generosity, where you can stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you can stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear, and those whose dignity has been denied. And then there's that day when you feel greatly privileged to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And I suspect if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we'd be celebrating it. So for 25 years, Homeboy Industries has been around, and for 30 years, 5 years before that, working with gang members, and homies have taught me everything of value, and I'm so grateful to them. But in the last couple of years, they've taught me how to text, and so I find that it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people, and so I'm pretty good at it, LOL and OMG and BTW, and the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately. So there I am with two homies, older vatos, Manuel and Poncho. They've worked for me for a long time, and they're going to help me give a talk at a high school in Palm Springs. So we meet at 9, and I have 400 employees, and so we drive. Well, Manuel's in the front seat, and he gets an incoming text, and he kind of chuckles to himself. And I said, well, what is it? He goes, oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office. Well, I had just seen Snoopy. He greeted me, gave me a big abrazote as the day was beginning. And Snoopy and Manuel work in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of gang members. And it's a tough job, actually. And I said, well, what's he say? He goes, oh, it's dumb. Hang on. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. Well, I nearly swerved into oncoming traffic. We laughed so hard, and then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How can we obliterate once and for all this illusion that we are separate? Folks on the margins are just hoping you'll stand out there with them, that you'll notice them. I had a very earnest 16-year-old gang member come into my office. He said, look, I need your divided attention. I said, you are in luck, because that is exactly what you'll be getting today. Lately I've been thinking about who saves people, and I think saving lives is really for the Coast Guard. I think you just show up and you accompany people, and you try to arrive at some kind of exquisite mutuality where there is no us and them, there's just us. At Homeboy Industries, I'm not the great healer, and that gang member over there is in need of my exquisite healing. The truth is, we're all in need of healing. We're all a cry for help. It's one of the things that joins us together. One of the great privileges in my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend, and I remember once a reporter had commented to him and said, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar just shrugged and smiled, and he said, the feeling's mutual. And that's the hope, where there is no daylight that separates us, and that's what we want to get at. There was no homie that found more job opportunities than this kid, Caesar, who I knew growing up in the projects. Got into a gang, and a smart kid, but he would always got into trouble and in and out of being locked up, and he had a dangerous sense of humor, as I recalled. But this one time, he had a period in his life in his early 20s, I'd find him a job in the private sector in one of our businesses, but he'd always gravitate back to vague criminality, and usually something involving drugs, the use of or the sale of. And so this one time he finished a 4-month stretch in a county jail, a probation violation. There he is sitting in front of me. And he says what gang members often say, this time it'll be different. I go, So I pick up the phone. I call a friend of mine who runs a vending machine company in Alhambra, California. And he had hired homies before, so I hoped, and he did. He says, tell Caesar he can start tomorrow. And Caesar began his time working at this company. And 2 weeks later, there he is again, sitting in front of my desk. And I go, híjole, Madre Santa, here we go. But this time he pulls out of his pocket his very first paycheck, and he says, damn, gee, this paycheck makes me feel proper. My mom, she's proud of me, and my kids, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job. And I said, well, gosh, who? And he looked at me strangely and he said, well, God, of course. Oh, sure, no, that's right. That's right, that would be God, yeah. He said, you thought I was going to say you. I said, no, gosh, God's number one, yeah. He said, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days. And I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, yeah, because God would have had struck down your ass already by now. He said. Well, we just dissolved in laughter, we fell out of our chairs, and I defy you to exactly identify who's the service provider and who's the service recipient. It's mutual. So Homeboy Industries was born during the time I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission. nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, it was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 active gangs at that time, making it, according to the LAPD, the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city was my parish. I buried my first young person killed because of the sadness in 1988, and on Friday I will bury my 191st, a young man named Alfred. And not all from that parish, but I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school because there were so many junior high, middle school age kids who had been given the boot from their home school, gang members. Nobody wanted them, and they were wreaking havoc and violent and selling drugs. So I walked out to the projects and I said, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said, yeah. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them, So that forced my hand a little bit. So I went to the convent, which was on the 3rd floor of our elementary school. And I gathered the nuns and I said, would you guys mind moving out, and we'll turn the convent into a school for gang members? And they said, sure. And go nuns, and so that brought gang members to the church, and that kind of upset the apple cart a little bit, because aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out? And that was a good challenge, I think. And then they said, if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women in the parish, we marched around the factories that surrounded the parish trying to find felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. So by 1992, I went to a movie producer who had $500 million, and I said, buy this old abandoned bakery across the street from the church. We'll call it Homeboy Bakery, where enemy rival gang members could bake bread together. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we came up with the highfalutin Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this venture. Not everything worked. Homeboy Plumbing really was not a huge success. Who knew people didn't want gang members in their homes? I did not see that coming. And trust me, nobody ever intends to do this, but we just sort of backed our way into becoming the largest gang intervention, rehab, and reentry program in the country, and nobody envisioned that. So there are 1,100 gangs in LA County and 120,000 gang members, and 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors to get all sorts of services. We have a lot of curricular things, especially for our 250 trainees who do 18 months with us. Anger management, parenting, grief and loss, GED. We have a school with 100 students still. Free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We have a designated clinic in our headquarters with 3 laser machines, 1 paid physician's assistant, but we have 42 volunteer doctors. They gave me the report the other day, 46,000 treatments a year, that's a lot of tattoo removal. And it all began because of a guy named Frank who wandered into my office. I didn't know him, and he was 2 days out of Corcoran State Prison. And he sits in front of me, and tattooed on his forehead like a billboard was "fuck the world." And it filled the entire space here. And he said, I am having a hard time finding a job. So I said, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one, And so where do I send him? McDonald's, do you want fries with that? No, I don't. So he bagged bread for me for 2 years, and we found a doctor at White Memorial Hospital who chipped away, gave me 1 hour a month to chip away at Frank's forehead and a few others. And pretty soon I had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members who wanted this service. And now Frank is a security guard at a movie studio, and there's no trace of the dumbest thing he had ever done. And we have a lot of mental health counselors, 6 paid ones, but 39 volunteer therapists and case managers. And then we have all our businesses. We have our training programs, a solar panel installation training program. We have Homeboy Bakery still that's thriving. Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise where we sell our logo stuff. Homeboy Silkscreen, been around for 20 years, and we have customers all over the country. Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall. We just opened a restaurant in February in the LAX American Airlines terminal. So I just show my fat Gregory Boyle card, and I can get free bread. So what else do we have? We have 4 mini farms where provide produce for our restaurants. We're in 46 farmers markets where we sell our goods. And we have a Homegirl Cafe where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. Some years ago, Diane Keaton showed up for lunch one day with a guy who's there once a week. And you know, Diane Keaton, a big movie star, Annie Hall, Oscar, Godfather movies. So she's there, and her waitress is Glenda. And Glenda's a homegirl, been there, done that, tattooed, felon, been to prison. She doesn't know who Diane Keaton is, and so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, well, what do you recommend? And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes, and Diane Keaton says, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And it's at that moment, for some reason, something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton, she goes, wait a minute, I feel like I know you from somewhere, like maybe we've met. And Diane Keaton decides to sort of deflect it humbly, you know, oh gosh, I don't know, I suppose I have one of those faces, you know, that people think they've seen before. And then Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. Yeah, that just took my breath away. And I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And if you'll permit me, I think Jesus sort of says it with some clarity when he looks at the gathered and he says, that you may be one. I think Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've forgotten that we belong to each other. How do we stand against forgetting that? For there's an idea that's taken root in the world, and it's at the root of all that's wrong with it, and the idea would be this, that there just might be lives out there that matter less than other lives. How do we collectively stand against that idea? All of us, I think, are called to be what Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, called enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. You don't hold the bar up and ask people to measure up. You just show up and you hold the mirror up and you tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth, and my truth is a gang member's truth, and it all happens to be the same truth, and here's what I think the truth is. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch folks on the margins in particular as they become that truth, as they inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out, and death can't touch it because it's huge. But part of the task at Homeboy Industries, anyway, in a therapeutic community that it is that you have to reach in and dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. And that's, I think, the most important transformational thing that happens at Homeboy. People discover who they are and they re-identify who they are in the world, and then they can go out, and the world will throw at them what it will, but this time it won't topple them. Some years ago, I went to speak, to give an all-day kind of conference on gangs, 9 to 3, for 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia, and I brought 2 homies with me, African-American gang member named Andre, and a Latino gang member named Jose, and I wanted them to get up and tell their stories because we had a lot of time to fill, you know. And I'd never heard their stories, and Jose, you know, in his 20s, been to prison, gang member, tattooed, but he also had a stretch of time as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. But at the time of this talk, he was working as part of our substance abuse team, helping others heal and discover recovery and sobriety. I never heard his story, and he got up in kind of an offhanded way. He said, "I guess you could say that my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, 'Why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me.'" Well, 600 social workers gasped. And he said, "It sounds way worser in Spanish," he said to them. You know. And then he said, "I guess I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walks me up to an orphanage, and she says, 'I found this kid.' And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could find out where she had dumped me, and she came and rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. The first t-shirt, because the blood would seep through, and the second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they make fun of me. "Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts?" And then he stops, and he couldn't speak any longer, and he was overwhelmed with this story, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of it that only he could see. And then through his tears, he says, "I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. And now I welcome my wounds. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds?" We seek a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. I was taking a leisurely stroll through the Acts of the Apostles the other day, and it's possible. I know you could sort of read it as a quaint snapshot of life in the early Christian community, or you could sort of see it as the measure of our health in any community. See how they love one another. That's a good measurement. There's nobody needy in this community. That's an excellent metric. But my favorite one is this: "And awe came upon everyone." The hope is to inch ourselves closer to awe and take giant steps away from judgment. They say that if you want to change anything, you have to change the metaphor. And I think looking back on 25 years working with gang members, and especially with Homeboy Industries, I think we helped change the metaphor in Los Angeles from tough on crime to a demonizing suppression to finally a kind of a smart on crime, and what if we were to invest in people rather than just try to incarcerate our way out of problems. I'll just end with this. People always ask me about enemies working together, and it certainly is dicey, at least initially. And homies will come, and our place is not for those who need help, it's only for those who want it, and they'll say, I'm ready, and I'll say, okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but you have to work with X, Y, and Z, and I rattle off the names of enemies, rivals. And they always do the same thing, they think for a long-ass time, and then they say, okay, I'll work with them, but I'm not going to talk to them. And I remember how that used to bother me in my early days, but then you discover that it's impossible to demonize people you know. Human beings can't sustain this. So I had this kid, named Youngster. That was his gang name, a little tiny guy, and everybody called him Youngster, and I thought he was ready. So I bring him to Homeboy Silkscreen, which has now been around for 20 years. Huge warehouse, kind of off campus, 2,500 customers from all over. High quality work, reasonably priced. We UPS to Atlanta. So I'm introducing him to his coworkers, and I'm watching him as he shakes hands with every single one, even enemies. He looks them straight in the eye. And I think, wow, this is great. Until he gets to the last guy, a guy who seems to be wanting to avoid this encounter altogether, a kid everybody called Puppet. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they mumble something. They stare at their shoes. They don't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies because I know what gangs they're from, but he just finished shaking hands with other enemies. I discovered later that this is a hatred that's really quite personal and deep, beyond which neither of them think they can really get past. So I sense that much at the moment. And I say, look, if you guys can't hang working together, let me know. I got a bunch of people who want this job. Calladitos, they don't say a word. Well, about 6 months later, Puppet goes to this store some distance from his home, one of those little corner stores. He buys something. And on the way home, he decides to take a shortcut, so he dodges into an alley. And because he's taken this detour, suddenly, unexpectedly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1, and they beat him badly. And he falls to the ground. And while he's lying there, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lifeless. Somebody finds his body and takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. But it's the policy there to keep you connected to machines for 48 hours so you can get 2 days of a flat read with no brain activity, and then the doctors can make it official. So this allowed family and friends to gather. I was at St. Louis University giving a talk. I flew home immediately. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many times its size. It was just really, truly horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. So at the end of the 48-hour period, I gave him a blessing, and I anointed his forehead with oil, and we disconnected. And a week later, I buried him. But in the first 24 hours while he was lying there beaten in the hospital, I was alone in my office, 8:30 at night, and the phone rings, and it's Youngster, Puppet's coworker from the Silkscreen, and he says, hey, that's messed up about what happened to Puppet. I said, yeah, it is. And then with a certain kind of eagerness even, he said, is there anything I could do? Can I give him my blood? And we both fall silent under the weight of it until finally he breaks the silence, choking back his tears, and he says with great deliberation, he was not my enemy. He was my friend. We worked together. Now, can I say that always happens at Homeboy Industries? Yes. Any exceptions? Not a single one. And it shouldn't surprise us that God's own dream come true for us, that we be one, just happens to be our own deepest longing for ourselves. For it turns out it's mutual. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, we wait for it. Thank you very much.
He just said to me, I went a little long and people want their ice cream sandwich.
It says I have 256
Yeah,
here.
you're great. Listen, you've been doing this for 30 years, and there's no doubt that the people that you have served have impacted you potentially and probably more than you've changed their lives. I mean, they would probably say the same thing. And for the people in the room that are young and starting projects and have great hearts for the people that they're serving, but yet there's highs and lows over the course of these 30 years you've been through, what advice would you give to them about perseverance in their work?
I think you're doomed if success is your goal. I know that sort of feels like that. It should be your goal. Sorry. Again, Mother Teresa says we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. And I think that's really true. So one of the reasons why I have 80 senior staff and we never have turnover, nobody wants to leave, and thousands of people want to come in and work there at that level, supervisor level. And one of the reasons is I think they've really learned that they don't care about results. And I know evidence-based outcomes, I know. But if you chase success, then watch what will happen. You'll change your mission and your vision, and suddenly you will morph yourself into an organization who will only work with the most likely to succeed so that you have better outcomes. That's kind of in the nonprofit world and working with people, especially the folks who are most disparaged. So I think it's kind of full speed ahead. It's keep moving, as Charles was saying. But, what's the eye on the prize? It's accompaniment and hold people, and with a no matter whatness, we always say at Homeboy. And results are somebody else's business. All you can do is kind of embrace a strategy and a philosophy and hang on for dear life, because in results and success may or may not come, but I will only take them. I'll only take success if it's a byproduct of my fidelity, and that keeps you from burnout, and that helps. Ice cream sandwiches, everybody.
Let's thank Father Greg again. Thank you.